America on the Road, winner of the International Auto Media Conference Gold Medal Award for Radio, and now in its 23rd year on the air. We'll be bringing you the latest automotive information from around the world. America on the Road is brought to you by DrivingToday.com, Mercury Insurance, and the Coalition for Vehicle Choice. I'm Jack Nerad, and with me is Chris Teague. Chris is a Maine-based auto journalist who writes for Driving Today and a number of other websites. Thanks for being with us today, Chris. How are things going?
Thanks, Jack. I'm very happy to be here. Things are going great. Really enjoying some warmer temperatures here, though in Maine that does mean mud season, which will run until probably June when things finally dry out.
Mud season. That's a season we didn't have, or we don't have in Southern California where I'm based. We're doing America on the Road cross country, and, that's fun to do. Family well and everything going well personally?
Family as well. We've all been, like everyone else in the world, stuck in one house together. But my wife, being a teacher, has worked out really well for our kids' education. So I'm sure they love to have a break, but she is thrilled to be able to keep them under wraps while we're all in the house together.
Are you essentially housebound all the time, or do you get time off for good behavior, or what's your situation in Maine?
I make a good amount of time every day to go for a drive or a walk. We have a dog, so we get to go out and enjoy the weather. And then whatever I'm driving that week, usually take the kids out for a ride every day. My youngest daughter doesn't like to nap unless she's in the car. So I've both enjoyed the time and cursed myself to always having to take a nap ride when she's home with us.
Good. As long as you're not napping while you're driving, I think that should work out just fine.
Not yet.
I have never seen, I'm in Southern California, I have never seen so many people walking so many dogs. It's just kind of amazing here. Of course, I'm in a fairly dense area of population, and maybe that's because I'm a little dense myself. But I think it's just amazing that when people are told not to go outside, they immediately go outside and walk their dogs. I think you can't just keep people away from each other. So that's what we're dealing with.
The dog's a good excuse to get outdoors.
Right. I think I have neglected to mention that in the road test segment today, we're going to be talking about the 2020 Jeep Wrangler EcoDiesel and the 2020 Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck. These are the vehicles that you and I had the chance to drive over the course of the last several days. Our special guest today is Dominic Najafi. He is the lead designer at Jaguar, and we'll be talking about his work on the Jaguar F-Type. It was recently refreshed. And he walked me through that. Pretty fascinating process to go through a refresh of a vehicle design that's pretty well established. So we'll go over that in the interview segment. But, let's talk about what's going on in the car industry because, this is an unprecedented time. We're used to going on events. We're used to traveling all over the United States and sometimes all over the world to test vehicles, and that's been called to a screeching halt. The thing you're doing with your family, taking those drives is basically the only kind of work we can do right now.
Yes, that's, basically the only exposure we're getting to new vehicles right now. But I think that's probably pales in comparison to the gravity of what's actually happening. But, as you mentioned, it's unprecedented times, but it's really heartening and really interesting to see how the automakers, now that they are pausing on new vehicle production, at least, are starting to retool themselves to make medical devices, personal protective equipment, and other gear to help medical professionals and other groups. So that's been kind of a throwback to the World War II era, all hands on deck attitude. It's been really inspiring to see, but it keeps their production lines rolling in some way or another, even though they're not making cars and trucks right now.
Yeah, it's very difficult for them. And, although the customers will come back, essentially the production capacity will be there, but the cars that they couldn't make during these weeks when people are furloughed from the factories, that's never going to come back. So that's something that they're having to deal with there. And kind of a tough thing to deal with, I think. But as you say, it is heartening. I know Ford Motor Company and General Motors in particular have just made a deep dive into producing things like respirators, ventilators, doing some other things for the medical profession and first responders that, as you say, very heartening. Apparently, a lot of this equipment needs to be made, and certainly car companies know how to gear up and produce things en masse.
I think that's true. So if you've seen some of the news articles floating around right now, there are a lot of those sort of back of the napkin engineering designs where they're taking parts off the shelf. So just a couple of days ago, I actually wrote an article on this, but Ford is using the ventilation fans from their cooled seats to put those into ventilators just to try to get the parts off the shelf without having to wait for the supply chain to kick into action. So some really, really neat engineering work that's being done behind the scenes that makes all this stuff work. So really cool to see that.
Right. I think the General Motors is going to use a Kokomo, Indiana plant that they had been making electronic equipment for their vehicles to perhaps make ventilators. I mean, that hasn't been solidified as we're talking here, but it's certainly been talked about and is likely to happen. With luck, we won't need all the ventilators that are going to be ordered, but it's nice to know that that production capacity can be ramped up very quickly. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on. We're creeping up on the time when the New York Auto Show would typically take place, and New York now is ground zero, I guess, in the United States for COVID-19 cases. Talk a bit about what we typically learn at auto shows, and then what we're missing out on. Again, I don't want to maximize or say, oh, poor us. Certainly this is much larger an issue than attending an auto show, but essentially we're unable to do some important parts of our work as so many in the United States are right now. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, one of the things that we get to see and what everyone eventually sees are the new vehicles, the new model rollouts, and then also a lot of sort of concept cars and futuristic kind of looking forward. So that's a lot of what auto shows do. And so when Geneva canceled a few weeks ago, we started seeing a lot of quote unquote virtual reveals. So press releases, videos, VR announcements, those sorts of things, live streams. And I think we'll see a lot of that coming out of New York as well. But I do also wonder, and you might be able to speak to this too, is some of the most important models that we kind of expected to see coming out either at or around the time of the New York Auto Show, like the Ford Bronco and some other models. It'll be really interesting to see whether we see that in a digital format or whether they end up waiting altogether to sort of maximize their impact once all of the virus and once we kind of get a handle on how things are going to go in public again.
Yeah, I think you're identifying something, very, very real, and I think Ford Motor Company in particular, because I think there's a lot of feeling that Ford maybe fumbled the Explorer launch, which was kind of analogous to what they're now facing with Bronco, and they don't want to fumble another one. So they're dealt a difficult hand here with having disease come exactly when they were going to introduce this new SUV. And I think they're going to probably wait for a very opportune moment rather than trying to piece something together. That's an important vehicle for them.
Yeah, well, I guess the good news for people who are really interested in it is that there is no shortage of leaks and spy photos of it. So even if we don't see it officially, I think most of us have seen almost all of it unofficially at this point in time.
Right. And one thing we miss by not attending events and going to auto shows is that face-to-face that we get with the engineers, with the product planners, with the executives of the car companies. That's just has gone out the window now, and it's something that helps our reporting pretty significantly. And so I for one can't wait for that to resume so we can talk to one another face to face again.
I agree. And one thing that's been really neat that's been happening kind of behind the scenes is the PR people and other journalists even have been kind of reaching out and asking either for help or to collaborate. And I think I've spoken with more PR people in the past 2 weeks than I have at any other point, just on the phone and on sort of text message, email, them offering help and then having conversations about it. But you're right, nothing replaces that, the face-to-face.
So true. Well, when we come back, and we're not going to be gone long, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the 2020 Jeep Wrangler EcoDiesel and the 2020 Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck. So stay with us as we give you some messages from people who bring us to you, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague. This is Jack Nerad back with you, and thanks so much for being with us. We really do appreciate you listening to us on America on the Road. This is the road test segment of the show, and interesting. I feel it's like the testosterone segment this week because we have the 2020 Jeep Wrangler and the 2020 Chevrolet Silverado. I mean, these are men's vehicles, he said, lowering his voice. You were driving the Chevrolet Silverado. Tell us your take on it.
Well, making it even more manly, it was the Silverado Trail Boss.
Oh, wow.
This is the LT trim that I had. It came with the, I think it was a 5.3 liter V8. Really nice sound. The sound didn't quite correspond with healthy acceleration. It was a little bit sluggish. I will say, though, that the Silverado, in comparison to the other trucks from both the big three and, the Toyota Tundra and Nissan Titan, was a very comfortable ride, even with the 2-inch lift kit that the Trail Boss came with. I think a lot of that came down to the big beefy tires. So there was a lot of rubber there to soak up some of the bumps. Took it out in the mud a little bit. Performed very well. The extra ground clearance is very helpful. I think for people really wanting to off-road, quote unquote, the Wrangler is a better choice. I think the Silverado's got a little bit, the long wheelbase is a little bit of a hindrance, and it's just a really big truck. So I think overall extremely comfortable. My pick for luxury would be the Ram still, and we have the truck comparison on Driving Today, where I think I noted that last year, and I think the Ford F-150 is still much more refined, but the Silverado is not a bad choice for anybody who loves a Chevy.
I mean, here's the thing, and I'm a Chevy guy, kind of naturally biased to Chevy from way back. Our family was just a Chevy family growing up. There were Ford families down the block, and we, of course, looked down our nose at them. But I think, the Silverado has kind of lost it a little bit versus its two major competitors that you named, the Ford F-150 and the Dodge Ram 1500. I have been very, very impressed with Ram trucks recently. They're, especially for personal use, they ride so well. I think Cars.com actually named the Ram as the luxury car of the year, and I applauded that because it really kind of captures what you get with the Ram. And from the inside, it's beautifully equipped and all that. And I just don't think in some ways Chevy has been keeping up. Like I say, I'm naturally biased toward Chevy, but they spent a lot of their time, I think, working on the cargo box, which, not all how you differentiate yourself on the size of the cargo box. I guess it makes a lot of difference to those who are using their truck for work all the time, or maybe it does. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think they kind of lost their mojo?
I do. I think that, so if you look at the comparison between the Chevy and the other two, so the Trail Boss I drove, I think, was right at $55,000 and had a luxury, like the leather package and heated seats, and it didn't feel like a cohesive package. It still has that old school kind of work truck feel to it with a little bit of a veneer of leather and some heated seats. When you step into a $50,000 or $60,000 F-150 or a Ram 1500, like a Laramie, which is the last one I had a few weeks ago, you feel the $50,000 or even the $60,000 or $70,000 in quality, the buttons, the build quality, the materials. And that's just not there for the Chevy. I understand the box is very important, and they've done some great things both with GMC and the tailgate and everything else. But I think that the packaging just isn't there compared to Ford and Ram.
Well, I think that's a good way to sum that up. And I have to agree with you. Again, this is a Chevy guy admitting that, and a little sadly, I guess. I was driving the 2020 Jeep Wrangler EcoDiesel, and I think the market had been clamoring, Jeep aficionados had been clamoring for a diesel engine for a long, long time. This isn't exactly the golden age of diesels right now, but having a diesel in a Wrangler makes so much sense. For one thing, the amount of torque that it delivers, so helpful in off-road driving situations. 442 pound-feet of peak torque out of this 3-liter EcoDiesel. So that alone, I think, is reason for celebration. But there's a lot to like about the Wrangler otherwise. I was in a Wrangler Unlimited, the 4-door. And I'm just amazed at the difference between this generation of the Wrangler and the previous generation. The previous generation, excuse the expression, I guess, was a bit of a rattle trap. I mean, it worked okay, but when you just drove it down the highway, you thought every bit of the bodywork might be coming off at any second. It was just so noisy and loose and a little bit crazy when you were driving it. And now they've tightened all that up, and this is now a vehicle. This Wrangler is now a vehicle that you could easily drive every day as a commuter over long stretches. My commutes have gone well over an hour sometimes here in Southern California, and that's something you just could not have said about the previous edition Wrangler. What's your take on that, Chris?
I agree. I actually drove probably the same model. I had the Unlimited Sahara trim with the EcoDiesel a few weeks ago, and you and I have had conversations about the ride quality of the Wrangler, the JL, which is the new generation before, and I think they've really knocked it out of the park. It's still rides a little bit rougher than a lot of people would probably think of, especially compared to a passenger car, but it's light years ahead of where it was just a few years ago.
What do you think is the most exciting or the feature of the Wrangler that just stands out to you above everything else?
I think it's the fact that, especially in the higher trim Wranglers, with the doors and the windows and everything on, you have a pretty luxurious package. There's leather, there's heated seats, and a really nice infotainment system. But then in the same vehicle, within 20 minutes, the top can be off, all the doors can be gone, the windshield folds down, and you're in total sand dune jumping buggy vehicle. But so I think that versatility is something that almost no other vehicle on the market has. Maybe the Bronco will, maybe it won't, but for now it's all the Wrangler show.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that versatility and that ability to pretty much go anywhere, I think there's nothing that really surpasses a Jeep Wrangler in terms of go anywhere. And with the EcoDiesel, I mean, there's good reason that a lot of outlets have praised it. We're certainly praising it here. If there's a Achilles heel, I guess it's cargo capacity, but that isn't why you're buying the thing. I did take it down to Home Depot and fill it up with home improvement stuff recently, but it didn't take much to fill it up. But I think that's kind of the only potential negative, and that's not much of one. I think you know what you're getting when you get a Wrangler.
I agree, and the powertrain is extremely refined. It's a smooth for a diesel engine. They think they did a really good job tuning the is it 8-speed transmission, right? So they did a good job tuning that. And I think the only surprise I got out of it was the sound. I think it had a very, very stout sound when on a cold start, which I enjoy, but some people might not. So I think that's probably the only old school quote unquote diesel thing that you get out of it. Otherwise, it's extremely smooth, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we both like the Wrangler quite a bit, and maybe think the Chevy Silverado has lost a little bit of its sheen against the competition. So maybe that's how we sum that segment up. When we come back, we'll be doing an interview with Dominic Najafi. He's the lead designer at Jaguar. We'll be talking about his work on the Jaguar F-Type. Fascinating things to say. What a cool job that is to be a designer with Jaguar and get to work on two-seat sports cars and things like that. So we'll be back to talk to him about that in a second, and stay with us. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad back with you, and right now we have a very special guest for you. His name is Dominic Najafi. I caught up with him recently talking about a very cool job that he has. He's a lead designer with Jaguar, and he got a chance to participate in the refresh of the F-Type, one of the legendary sports cars from Jaguar. So let's go to that interview and see what he has to say about that very, very cool job that he has. Dominic Najafi. Well, we're at the Chicago Auto Show, the North American debut of the revised F-Type. What an exciting thing it's got to be with Dominic Najafi, who is the chief creative exterior designer, Jaguar, and talking about the F-Type. It's an iconic car, the follow-on to definitely an iconic car, and has become a bit of an icon itself, the F-Type. Talk about just the thrill of dealing with a car like this versus, say, a crossover.
Yeah, so you're totally right. The F-Type has really become a modern-day icon for us and a bit of a hero car. And we absolutely love it in the design studio. The chance to work on a sports car is always so exciting for the designers, for the design team. It gets very competitive to be the one who gets that design chosen, and it really has that great positive influence on every project we do, and it is what we live for. We love designing sports cars. They are Jaguar. If you think of Jaguar was born as a sports car brand, some very innovative and special cars from racing. We've got priceless racing cars in our heritage. We want to embrace those. We want to never forget those and always push forward. Be inspired by them, but in a forward-thinking way, like those cars were. So yeah, Jaguars is sports cars are always a big part of Jaguar, and something real privilege to work on, definitely.
Talk about doing a revision to a design, which is what we're seeing with the F-Type, versus a clean sheet of paper design. Tell me the pluses and minuses of such a thing.
So it's not as different as you think, because what we do is, first of all, we always, with a car, when we're doing a refresh like we've done now, you've got something to base it on, and you've got to be very self-critical. You've got to almost pretend you're judging it as if you've done nothing to do with it, and you've got to pick all the faults. Be very self-critical with it first, and then make sure the refresh it fixes those issues in a way. Right. But at the same time,
I should ask, did you have something to do with the original, or you're a different set of eyes?
Yeah, so I've been at Jaguar 8 years. Right. So when I joined 8 years ago, the car was done, and actually it was the CX-16 concept, which is the F-Type concept, that really attracted me to Jaguar. I was working at Bentley at the time, and I really was inspired by actually to come to Jaguar. It looked like those guys were having fun and producing cool stuff. So I got there, and I'm really, really happy. So yeah, to then work on the next one was quite unusual.
Yeah.
Really,
so I interrupted your thought, but describe to me, you have this, already existing design.
Yeah.
Pretty well established design.
Yeah.
A lot of people loved it.
Yeah.
What do you do?
So you've got to be self-critical, really, because you end up spending a lot of time following the cars around, you see them on the street, and you can really see the nuances of where you think maybe you can improve it. But at the same time, when designers start sketching, we always say, even though it's a refresh, just sketch from a blank piece of paper anyway, and see what comes out. Okay, and then there'll be a certain feel, or there'll be a character captured in a fresh sketch that you can think, right, let's try and get that into this car with the restrictions we've got of maybe carrying over certain panels like doors and things. But as you saw from the car, the front end is completely really new with the bonnet, the whole front end. So you still approach it from a fresh perspective, really, and try and get as much new and progressive thinking in there as possible.
Okay. Well, walk us through it. You just gave me a nice walk around. It's hard to do that on radio.
That's okay, yeah.
But pretend we're looking at the car and walk us through what you just showed me.
Okay. So big thing is really trying to enhance that front end presence and make the car look even more assertive, even more bold. And so we've got these really slim horizontal lamps now. I think they're the slimmest lamps in production. Pixel LED technology, so high technology, and
by lamps you mean headlights.
Headlights. Yes. And as you saw as well, we making sure that the overall presence of the car is just enhanced. The grille is bigger and deeper. Lamps are slimmer, wider, and the air intakes in the corners are even more sculptural and kind of line up with the lamps now and have a very ground-hugging presence. So that's a big picture. But then we go into detail. As you saw as well, we call it this like creative layering, where the closer you go, the more you'll find, the more intrigue you'll find, the more care and attention you'll find. This car has been lovingly designed and crafted by a close team who live and breathe the car, and we really want people to feel that. So the lamps have this beautiful monogram pattern that you'll see in the on headlamps, tail lamps, and the interior stitching. So we're tying that pattern in together. The grille has that embossed F-Type script on the base of the bezel that links to sort of engraving jewelry, this type of thing. So it's a great strong front end, and that means we've got a new bonnet, and as you just saw as well, the bonnet is just got so much more form and shape into the bonnet now.
What we might call the hood.
The hood, yeah. So
that's the roof for you, right?
I'm talking in English now, and this sort of really powerful long bonnet, that's really famous for Jaguar. The original sports cars like XK120s, E-Types.
E-Types, certainly.
Yeah, totally. They've really inspired the dramatic proportion of the F-Type. And so as we go around the side, we've got some beautiful detailing, like a new side vent with a leaper on the side. The interior has got high technology now with the HD 12.3-inch cluster in front of the driver, just to give that, again, extra driver connection, and that's more interactive as well. And then the craftsmanship is just even more enhanced. It's a pure Jaguar, the way the seats and doors are stitched, the way you get the beautiful metal details in the car, and this As you saw, this tiny little kind of Jaguar established 1935 script that just reminds people this is a company that has amazing heritage. We've been here a long time, and we don't plan to go anywhere other than forward.
Right.
In the
And
future.
you're building in little Easter eggs everywhere.
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
the people, maybe they'll see it in the showroom,
Yeah.
maybe they'll see it the first day they take delivery, or
Yeah.
maybe they won't really notice until 6 months into
Yeah.
owning it.
Yeah.
I'm the type of guy who really loves washing my own cars.
Okay, that's
because
good.
I just like to see the contour, and
yeah.
I feel I get much closer to my cars doing that.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about surfacing and
Yeah.
how important that is.
Yeah, it's massively important. We always break down the design into a few areas. First is proportion. Okay, it's that overall proportion, as you say, bonnet length versus wheel size versus overhangs, this type of thing. That's what gets a car to really sit well. But then the surfacing and the lines on the car are so important. They really describe the car. And at Jaguar, we really look at what we call is almost like fuselage surfaces in the doors. This sort of like these sort of real strong barrel shapes that are very authentic and inspired by the early race cars. The bonnet sculpture is really strong, and we say that because in natural light you start to see reflections. I think people see reflections and highlights subconsciously, but that's what gives you the impression of a high quality car. And a car that's very
in a sense
dramatic.
of depth and a sense of something,
Exactly.
as opposed to here's a plain stamp sheet of metal, as
Exactly.
opposed to something with contour.
Yeah, definitely. And that's and you can be inspired by all sorts of things for that: nature, architecture, and even, as we said before, our new studio is state of the art. We've got perfect lighting that angles over the car. And we are designing these reflections and highlights. So we're designing what the surface reads, and that's what gives the car timeless quality. We don't try and decorate the cars too much. We let them just sort of minimal lines that are very strong, and then let softer surfaces kind of like form in between. We don't want to do anything too fashion-based that you'll see of as a time and maybe date quite quick. We want to have a timeless quality, and that takes a lot of discipline, because you always start with a design probably with too many lines, and then you start to take away, and to the point you think, okay, that's enough, So it takes actually time and discipline to simplify a car and give it clarity.
Well, talk about the rear end. I mean, that's probably an example of that, right? It's kind of simplified.
Very simple, yeah. So the rear end, I think, is one of the strongest parts of today's car, the outgoing car anyway. When you follow like a coupe, the R version, it's as easily as good as any Ferrari, I think, that rear end. So we've just really enhanced it. We've made it more planted to the ground. So the lamps are slimmer again, darker, with this lovely chicane signature that's almost inspired by calligraphy, with the line weight of that signature. The number plate aperture, as I said before, is kind of the lines angle outwards now, which is quite unusual to do, but it really plants the corners, plants your eye to the corners of the car, giving it more of a ground hugging presence. So it is very simple, it's clean, but it's got a real kind of weight to it. But we say like a premium mass to it. It's like feels expensive. It feels like it's got a real solid stance. So it's a beautiful car.
I mean, you've got a history in luxury brands, certainly, with Bentley and Jaguar, of course. It strikes me that what is going forward, when we have powertrain that's great in any car, even a Kia or Hyundai, great powertrains, ergonomics are quite good in those cars too. A big separator is going to be exactly what you do, is design. That's what separates a great suit from a not so great suit, right? That's what separates expense from not expense. It gives you the prestige that you need. Talk a bit about the responsibility of doing that, and how you maintain that degree of premium in a market where premium seems to trickle down pretty rapidly.
It's a really good point. The general standard of design now is just really high. So there's a new Genesis over there that is really aiming at big things, and a few years ago you didn't know that brand at all, and suddenly it's on Jaguar's radar. And that just makes that's really motivating when design is getting better, and you've just got to keep pushing more and more and more. It's really great to have that. Everyone's pushing each other along. So what we do, I mean, we've got to just Jaguar has values, right? So we always think of Jaguar as performance, beauty, innovation, luxury as well. And we've got to stay true to the values, but find out different ways of just exploring them. We've got to stay true to what Jaguar really means to people. It's a car that is born out of emotion. It's not just a rational product. It's not, you don't need one. You see one and you want one, and you think, right, I've got to get one of those. And we've still got to have that in our mind. The beauty of the car is still really important, and that is I said it's through simplicity, it's through making sure the proportions are always really spot on, and then it's just it's a great design discipline just to, kind of really focus on what Jaguar's about. So yeah, I would say that it's more competitive than ever, and that just makes our job more exciting.
What are some things you think you might not be able to do at Jaguar, and I mean this in a good way, that others would do, and that you've seen others do especially in terms of exterior design?
Yeah, I think that might just come down to some of this, like the funky stuff, or the we call it like almost over designing and too much decoration. Styling, because we say in the studio, sometimes we'll say that's a bit too much styling, and then not design, and there's a difference. Our design team really plays a big part in influencing the architectures. We don't just receive the architecture and then draw over it. We're part of creating that architecture with engineers. We work very well together, so that's how we go a higher level than just styling. And I think some of the other cars you'll see, maybe it'll get a wow factor for a short space of time because there's so much stuff on it, and it's like, wow, what's this? But then that just fades quicker to us. So that's what we won't really do.
Anything else you'd like to add about F-Type, or what you do for a living? Because I think it's fascinating. A lot of people. Yeah. So many people would love to have your job, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking actually, and I might try to say this later, that I was a kid, I was a little boy drawing cars, and actually we've got this Hot Wheels thing going on at the moment, and I had Hot Wheels, I was drawing them, and then trying to convince my parents, I think it's a job, I think you could do it as a job. They didn't know that at the time. So to be here at this event, new F-Type, it's great, it's a dream come true, and I just encourage, if any people out there with that passion, go for it, because it is a good job. I think there's never been a better time to be a car designer because of all the challenges that we've got in front of us now, and the new technologies, and it's never been a better time to be. I think the sort of creative influence you can have in a design team now is more than ever actually. So it's good.
Yeah,
good.
And my sense is it's going to become more and more important. It's going to be
Definitely.
The major differentiator.
Yeah, we hope so.
So Dominic Najafi, thanks so much for being with us. We really do appreciate it. The new F-Type is terrific. I loved it before. I love it even more now. So thanks for being with us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. No problem at all.
Well, that's this edition of America on the Road. Thanks to Chris Teague for being with us. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Thanks so much for being with us. Please join us again next time for America on the Road on Driving Today. I'm Jack Nero.